Emma arrived at Hollow Hill, an old mansion inherited from a distant relative she never knew. Surrounded by a dense forest, the mansion looked abandoned and sinister. The sky was overcast, and a sense of unease washed over her as she approached the entrance. Emma pushed open the heavy wooden door, which groaned loudly. Inside, the mansion was dark and musty. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung in the corners. An eerie silence filled the air, broken only by the distant sound of creaking floorboards. Emma stepped into the living room, where old furniture lay shrouded in white sheets. An old fireplace dominated one wall, with a large mirror above it. She saw a faint movement in the mirror, but when she turned around, the room was empty. The only sound was the faint ticking of an old clock. In the hallway, Emma found portraits of her ancestors. The eyes of the painted figures seemed to follow her. She felt a chill as she passed by a particularly stern-looking man. Suddenly, she heard a whisper, but when she turned around, no one was there. Emma discovered the mansion's library, filled with ancient books and old furniture. She found an old leather-bound journal on a desk. As she opened it, she read about dark rituals and mysterious deaths that plagued her family. The air grew colder, and she felt an unseen presence watching her. Emma noticed a hidden door behind a bookshelf. She hesitated, but pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. The air was damp and cold. Holding her flashlight, she descended the stairs, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence. The basement was cold and damp, with strange symbols painted on the walls. An altar stood in the center, surrounded by melted candles and old, tattered books. As Emma approached the altar, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The symbols seemed to glow faintly, and she heard distant, echoing whispers. Emma's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. The whispers grew louder, and she felt a cold hand brush against her arm. Panic set in as she fumbled to turn the flashlight back on. When it flickered back on, she saw a ghostly figure standing by the altar, staring at her with hollow eyes. Desperate to escape, Emma turned and ran up the stairs. The house seemed to come alive, with doors slamming and shadows moving around her. She reached the front door, threw it open, and ran into the stormy night, her heart pounding. She didn't stop until she reached her car. Breathing heavily, Emma glanced back at the mansion as she reached her car. In an upstairs window, she saw the ghostly figure watching her. The whispers faded, but the memory of that night would haunt her forever. She drove away, vowing never to return.
In an old, dusty attic, Emily found a large, ornate mirror covered with a white cloth. Curious, she pulled off the cloth, revealing a beautifully carved frame and a mirror that looked untouched by time. Her friend Jack warned her not to touch it, but Emily couldn't resist. As Emily gazed into the mirror, her reflection seemed to flicker. For a moment, she saw a shadowy figure standing behind her. She turned around quickly, but no one was there. Jack saw nothing and told her it was just her imagination. That night, Emily had a terrible nightmare. She dreamt of being trapped in the mirror, unable to escape. Shadowy figures surrounded her, whispering her name. She woke up in a cold sweat, the image of the figures lingering in her mind. The next day, strange things started happening. Objects moved on their own, and Emily felt a constant cold presence. Jack suggested they move the mirror back to the attic, but Emily felt an odd attachment to it and refused. Emily's grandmother visited and immediately recognized the mirror. She warned Emily about the curse, explaining that the mirror traps souls and that they must destroy it before it's too late. Emily was skeptical, but agreed to consider it. That evening, Emily started acting strange. Her eyes glazed over, and she spoke in a voice that wasn't her own. Jack realized the mirror was possessing her and tried to snap her out of it, but she attacked him, screaming that they mustn't destroy the mirror. Jack and Emily's grandmother decided to destroy the mirror. They grabbed a hammer and approached it cautiously. The mirror's surface rippled, and shadowy hands reached out, trying to stop them. With a desperate swing, Jack shattered the mirror. As the mirror shattered, a wail echoed through the room, and the shadowy figures dissolved into smoke. Emily collapsed, unconscious but unharmed. The room felt lighter, and the cold presence was gone. Emily woke up, confused but relieved. In the days that followed, Emily recovered and felt grateful to Jack and her grandmother. They disposed of the mirror's remains and made sure to never speak of it again. The house felt peaceful once more. Emily redecorated her room, replacing the mirror with a beautiful painting. Life returned to normal, and the haunting memories faded away. They knew they'd face something dark, but their bond was stronger than ever.
In the outskirts of a small town stands an old, dilapidated house, its windows shattered, and its walls covered in ivy. Four friends, Tom, Sarah, Emily, and Alex, decide to explore the abandoned house one evening. As they approach, the moon casts eerie shadows on the broken porch. With trepidation, the friends push open the creaking front door and step into the house's foyer. The air is musty, and dust motes dance in the beams of their flashlights. As they explore further, they feel a sense of unease settle over them, as if the house itself is watching their every move. Inside the house, they encounter rooms filled with decaying furniture and peeling wallpaper. Strange symbols are etched into the walls, and the temperature drops noticeably as they explore deeper. A feeling of dread washes over the group as they realize they are not alone in the house. As they delve further into the house, they begin to hear faint whispers that seem to echo through the halls. The whispers grow louder and more insistent, filling the air with an eerie chorus that sends shivers down their spines. Shadows dance on the walls, twisting and contorting in unnatural ways. Suddenly, a ghostly figure materializes before them, a translucent apparition with hollow eyes and outstretched hands. Its ethereal form hovers in the air, its movements slow and deliberate. Frozen with fear, the friends watch as the ghostly figure drifts closer, its presence filling the house with a chilling cold. With a collective cry, the friends turn and flee from the house, their hearts pounding with terror. They race through the dark corridors, their breath ragged and their footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind them, the ghostly figure follows, its unearthly wails echoing through the empty halls. Exhausted and trembling, the friends emerge from the house, their minds reeling from the horrors they've witnessed. They vow never to speak of their night in the haunted house again, haunted by the shadows that lurk within its walls. But they know that some secrets are best left buried in the darkness.
The old house stood at the end of the lonely street, its windows shattered and its wooden walls weathered by time. Sarah had heard stories about the house since she was a child. It was said to be haunted, a place where shadows whispered secrets and the air was thick with dread. Determined to prove it was all just a myth, she decided to spend the night there. As Sarah pushed open the creaking door, the musty smell of decay hit her. The interior was dark, with only the faintest light filtering through the grimy windows. She stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under her weight. Every corner seemed to be alive with whispers, just out of reach. Sarah moved cautiously into the living room. The furniture was covered in dust and cobwebs draped from the ceiling. An old grandfather clock stood against the wall, its hands frozen at midnight. As she looked around, she heard a faint whispering, like someone speaking from the shadows. On the wall hung a portrait of a stern-looking man. His eyes seemed to follow Sarah as she moved. She felt a chill run down her spine. The whispers grew louder, and for a moment, she thought she saw the man's eyes blink. She stepped back in fear, her heart racing. Sarah found herself drawn to a door partially hidden behind a tattered curtain. She hesitated before pulling it open, revealing a set of stairs leading down into the darkness. The whispers were clearer now, urging her to descend. With trembling hands, she held her flashlight and began her descent. The basement was cold and damp, the walls lined with old shelves holding dusty jars and forgotten relics. The whispers were louder here, almost tangible. Sarah felt a presence behind her and spun around but saw nothing. Suddenly, an old radio crackled to life, playing a haunting lullaby. Sarah's flashlight flickered and died. In the darkness, she felt something brush against her arm. She backed away, stumbling over an old trunk. The whispers were deafening now. She managed to open the trunk, revealing an old diary. The pages told the story of a man who had lost his family and descended into madness, cursing the house and anyone who entered. Realizing the danger, Sarah grabbed the diary and rushed up the stairs. The house seemed to come alive, the whispers turning into screams. Doors slammed shut around her, and the air grew colder. She reached the front door and burst out into the night, the whispers fading behind her. Outside, Sarah collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. She looked back at the house, now silent and still. She knew she could never explain what happened, but she had the diary as proof. As she walked away, she heard one last whisper in the wind, promising that the shadows would always be watching. It was a stormy night, the kind that forces even the bravest souls to stay indoors. Sarah sat alone in her dimly lit living room, the howling wind rattling the windows. She glanced at the clock, 11:45 p.m. Just 15 more minutes until midnight. She tried to focus on the book in her lap, but a sense of unease crept over her, making it impossible to concentrate. Suddenly there was a loud knock at the door. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour, in such weather? She hesitated, then slowly walked to the door, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the house. Peeking through the peephole, she saw nothing but darkness. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. No response. She turned away, thinking it must have been the wind playing tricks on her, when the knock came again, louder this time. Determined to face her fears, she unlocked the door and opened it a crack. A blast of cold air hit her, and there on the doorstep stood a small child, drenched and shivering. The child's face was hidden beneath a dark, hooded raincoat. "Can I come in?" the child asked, voice barely audible over the storm. Sarah hesitated. Something about the child felt off, but she couldn't leave them out in the cold. "Of course," she said, stepping aside to let the child in. "What's your name?" The child didn't answer. Instead, they silently moved past her and stood in the center of the living room, water pooling around their feet. Sarah closed the door and turned to face the child, noticing that despite the soaking clothes, the child's face was eerily dry. "Where are your parents?" Sarah asked. But the child remained silent. She moved closer, intending to help remove the wet raincoat, but the child stepped back, finally lifting their head. Sarah gasped. The face beneath the hood was not that of a child, but of something far older with hollow, sunken eyes and a twisted grin. "They couldn't make it," the entity whispered, voice dripping with malice. Fear paralyzed Sarah as the creature took a step forward. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The lights flickered and the room grew colder. Suddenly, the clock struck midnight, and with each chime, the creature grew larger and more menacing. Sarah stumbled backward, her mind racing for an escape. As the final chime echoed through the house, the creature lunged at her, its bony fingers outstretched. In a final act of desperation, Sarah grabbed the nearest object, a heavy candlestick, and swung it with all her might. The creature let out an unearthly screech and vanished into thin air, leaving Sarah alone in the dark, trembling and gasping for breath. The storm outside began to subside, and a strange calm settled over the house. Sarah looked around, her heart still pounding, but the creature was gone. She locked the door, bolted the windows, and spent the rest of the night huddled on the couch, the candlestick clutched tightly in her hands. As dawn broke, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax. She had survived the night, but she knew deep down that the creature was still out there, waiting for another stormy night.
Lucy and her husband, Mark, move into an old Victorian-style house they bought at a bargain price. The house is large and filled with antique furniture. As they unpack, Lucy finds a covered portrait in the attic. She pulls off the cloth, revealing a beautiful woman with haunting eyes. She decides to hang it in the living room.
That night, Lucy wakes up to strange noises, soft whispers and the sound of footsteps. She dismisses it as the house settling. When she looks at the portrait, the eyes seem to follow her. She feels a chill but convinces herself it's just her imagination. The next day, Lucy hears whispers coming from the living room. She finds Mark staring at the portrait, mesmerized. When she touches his shoulder, he snaps out of it, claiming he heard the woman in the portrait whispering his name. Lucy starts to feel uneasy about the painting. Determined to understand the painting's origins, Lucy visits the local library. She discovers that the woman in the portrait is Isabella, a former owner of the house who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. It's rumored that her spirit haunts the house. That night, the whispers grow louder, and Lucy sees a shadowy figure moving through the house. The air grows cold, and the portrait seems to come alive, the woman's expression changing to one of anger. Lucy feels a strong, malevolent presence. Lucy and Mark contact a paranormal investigator. The investigator explains that Isabella's spirit is trapped and angry. He suggests they find something that belonged to Isabella and use it to perform a ritual to release her spirit. Lucy searches the attic and finds an old diary belonging to Isabella. The diary details her life and the love she lost. It also mentions a locket that she cherished. Lucy finds the locket hidden in a secret compartment in the attic. Lucy and Mark, guided by the paranormal investigator, perform the ritual using the locket. As they chant, the house shakes, and Isabella's ghostly figure appears. She looks sad, but grateful. She reaches out, touches the locket, and then fades away. The air becomes warm and peaceful. With Isabella's spirit at rest, the house feels lighter and more welcoming. The whispers and footsteps stop. Lucy and Mark decide to stay and cherish the history of the house. They hang the locket in a special place to remember Isabella. Months later, Lucy and Mark enjoy their peaceful home. They often think about Isabella and the extraordinary events that brought them closer together. The house is no longer haunted, but the memories of the past live on in a peaceful way.
In a small town nestled among the hills, an old abandoned mill stood tall, its dark silhouette looming against the twilight sky. For years, the townsfolk had whispered tales of strange occurrences within its decaying walls. Tonight, a group of curious teenagers dared each other to explore its depths, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. Among the group was Sarah, a brave soul who accepted the dare without hesitation. Her friends, Alex, Jake, and Emily, exchanged nervous glances but followed her lead. Armed with only flashlights and nervous laughter, they ventured into the mill, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the floorboards creaked beneath their feet. Shadows danced on the walls, and strange symbols adorned the crumbling brickwork. The group pressed on, drawn deeper into the labyrinthine corridors by an unseen force. As they explored, they began to hear whispers, a faint, ghostly sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Sarah's heart raced as she urged her friends to keep moving, but the whispers grew louder, echoing through the halls like a sinister chorus. Suddenly, a figure materialized before them, a ghostly apparition with hollow eyes and a tattered gown. Sarah gasped, frozen in terror as the ghost reached out with spectral hands. With a scream, she bolted, her friends close behind, but the ghost pursued them with relentless determination. They raced through the corridors, their hearts pounding in their chests as the ghost closed in. Sarah could feel its icy breath on her neck, its chilling touch sending shivers down her spine. With every turn, they prayed for an exit, but the mill seemed to stretch on endlessly, trapping them in its clutches. Just when all hope seemed lost, they stumbled upon a door, a faint glimmer of moonlight shining through the cracks. With a burst of adrenaline, they pushed through, stumbling out into the night air. Behind them, the mill collapsed in a cloud of dust, the ghost's haunting cries fading into the distance. As they collapsed in exhaustion, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the ghost still lingered, watching them from the shadows. She vowed never to return to the mill, but she knew its haunting presence would stay with her forever, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked in the darkness.
It was a dark, stormy night. 4 friends, Tom, Lisa, Mark, and Anna, stood outside an old, abandoned manor on the outskirts of town. They had heard stories about the place being haunted and decided to explore it for themselves. With a mix of excitement and fear, they pushed open the heavy, creaking door and stepped inside. The interior was dark and dusty, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. The air was thick and musty. They walked into what seemed to be the living room. An old chandelier hung from the ceiling, and a grand piano sat in one corner, its keys covered in dust. Suddenly, the piano played a single haunting note, and the friends froze in fear. Deciding to explore further, they moved into the library. Shelves filled with old, decaying books lined the walls. Lisa picked up a book, and as she opened it, a cold breeze blew through the room and the candles flickered. They found a door leading to the basement. Hesitant but curious, they decided to go down. The stairs creaked with every step, and the air grew colder as they descended. The basement was dark and damp. In the basement, they discovered old furniture and strange markings on the walls. Suddenly, they heard whispering voices all around them. Mark shined his flashlight towards a corner, revealing a ghostly figure standing there, watching them. Panicked, they ran back up the stairs. The house seemed to come alive, with doors slamming and windows rattling. They finally burst out of the front door, breathing heavily and vowing never to return. Back at their homes, they gathered together, still shaken by the experience. They knew they had encountered something truly supernatural and agreed to never speak of it again. A group of friends, Alex, Maya, Ben, and Emma, arrive at the secluded Willow Lake for a weekend camping trip. The sun dips below the horizon as they set up their tents on the shore, the water reflecting the fading light. Excitement fills the air as they gather around a crackling campfire, swapping stories and laughter. As night falls, a thick fog rolls in from the lake, shrouding the campsite in an eerie haze. The friends exchange uneasy glances as the temperature drops, the crackling of the campfire the only sound breaking the silence. Shadows dance in the mist and strange shapes move just beyond the edge of their vision. As the night wears on, the friends begin to notice strange occurrences around the campsite. Personal belongings go missing, only to reappear in odd places moments later. The tent flaps flutter open and shut of their own accord, and eerie whispers float on the breeze. Tension mounts as they realize they are not alone in the darkness. Suddenly, a figure materializes out of the fog, a spectral apparition with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. The friends recoil in horror as it reaches out towards them, its form shifting and wavering in the mist. Frozen with fear, they watch as it drifts closer, its unearthly wails echoing in the night. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, the friends scramble to pack up their belongings and flee from the campsite. They race through the fog-shrouded forest, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the darkness. Branches claw at their skin, and roots trip them up as they push themselves to their limits, desperate to escape the grasp of the malevolent spirit. Exhausted and out of breath, the friends finally emerge from the forest and into the safety of the open meadow. They collapse on the grass, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. As they catch their breath, they exchange relieved glances, grateful to have survived the night. But as they look back at Willow Lake, they can't shake the feeling that they have awakened something ancient and malevolent that will continue to haunt the wilderness for years to come.
The abandoned Ravenswood Asylum stood on a hill, shrouded in fog and mystery. Jessica, a paranormal investigator, arrived at dusk, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. She parked her car and gazed at the looming building, its windows dark and empty like soulless eyes. Jessica pushed open the heavy front door, which groaned loudly. Inside, the asylum was dark and cold. She turned on her flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. The walls were lined with peeling paint and graffiti, and the floor was littered with debris. Her footsteps echoed eerily as she ventured deeper. As Jessica explored the main hallway, she felt a sudden chill. She turned to see a ghostly figure of a nurse standing at the end of the corridor. The nurse's face was pale and expressionless, and she slowly raised a finger to her lips as if to shush Jessica. Then she vanished into thin air. Jessica entered a room that appeared to have been a common area. Old, broken furniture was scattered around, and the walls were covered with faded, eerie drawings. As she examined the drawings, she heard faint whispers. She turned to see shadowy figures moving along the walls, their eyes glowing faintly. In the corner of the room, Jessica found an old journal. She opened it and read about the asylum's dark history, experiments on patients, mysterious deaths, and cover-ups. The journal mentioned a hidden basement where the worst atrocities occurred. Determined, Jessica set out to find it. Jessica found a hidden door behind a bookshelf, leading to a staircase that descended into darkness. She took a deep breath and started down the steps. The basement was cold and damp, with rusty equipment and old stained medical tools scattered around. The air was thick with the smell of decay. In the basement, Jessica saw the spirits of the patients. They were trapped, reliving their torment. A particularly sorrowful spirit, a young woman named Alice, revealed that the asylum's director had performed cruel experiments on them. The spirits begged Jessica to help them find peace. Jessica found a hidden chamber where the director's spirit lingered, still obsessed with his experiments. She confronted him, demanding he release the tortured souls. The director's spirit raged, but the power of the trapped souls combined with Jessica's determination forced him to vanish into the ether. With the director's spirit gone, the asylum began to crumble. Jessica hurried out, watching from a safe distance as the building collapsed. The spirits were finally free, and a sense of peace settled over the area. As the sun rose, the fog lifted, revealing a bright new day. Michael, a man in his late 30s, receives a surprising letter. His great-uncle, whom he barely knew, has passed away, leaving him an old manor in the remote countryside. Intrigued and financially struggling, Michael decides to visit the manor with his wife, Sarah, and their teenage daughter, Emily. Michael reads the letter aloud. It says we have inherited an estate. Sarah looks at him skeptically. Are you sure this is a good idea? Michael nods. We could use a fresh start. Besides, what harm could it do? Emily, always up for an adventure, adds, It sounds exciting. Let's go. The family arrives at the manor in the late afternoon. The mansion is grand but clearly neglected, surrounded by overgrown gardens and tall, dense trees. The sky is overcast, casting a gloomy shadow over the scene. Emily shivers. This place gives me the creeps. Michael tries to be optimistic. It's just old. We can fix it up. Sarah clutches Emily's hand. Let's stay close and see what's inside. Inside, the manor is filled with dust, cobwebs, and a musty smell. The furniture is covered with white sheets. As they explore, Emily finds an old, ornate mirror in one of the rooms. Unlike the rest of the house, the mirror's surface is strangely clean. Look at this mirror, Emily calls out. Sarah touches the frame. It's beautiful, but it feels out of place. Michael frowns. Why is it so clean? That night, the family tries to settle in. Michael and Sarah fall asleep quickly, but Emily struggles. Around midnight, she hears faint whispers and feels a cold breeze. The mirror in her room begins to fog up, revealing words written from the inside. Help us, it reads. Terrified, Emily runs to her parents' room. Mom, Dad, there's something in the mirror. Michael, groggy, tries to comfort her. It's just your imagination, Emily. Go back to sleep. The next day, the family visits the local library to learn more about the manor. They discover that it was owned by Michael's great-uncle, a reclusive man with a dark interest in the occult. Sarah reads from an old newspaper. Local recluse found dead under mysterious circumstances. Manor believed to be haunted. Michael sighs. This explains a lot. We need to be careful. Emily, still shaken, adds, What if the spirits are still here? Back at the manor, Michael discovers a hidden door in the basement. Inside, they find an old study filled with books on the occult, strange artifacts, and a large locked chest. Sarah examines a book. He was into dark stuff. This can't be good. Michael tries to open the chest, but fails. We need to find the key. There might be answers inside. Emily points to a strange symbol on the wall. I've seen this symbol before, in my room. That night, the hauntings escalate. Objects move on their own, and ghostly apparitions appear. Emily is dragged out of bed by an unseen force, and Sarah sees a shadowy figure standing at the end of the hallway, watching them. We have to leave now, Sarah screams, but the doors are locked and won't open. Michael grabs an old book from the study. This book has instructions to banish the spirits. We need to perform the ritual. Desperate, the family gathers in the basement to perform the ritual. They light candles and arrange the symbols in a circle. Michael reads the incantation aloud, while Sarah and Emily hold hands, trembling. As the ritual progresses, the house shakes, and the spirits grow more agitated. A blinding light fills the room, and the spirits are drawn into the circle, screaming. Keep going, Michael! Sarah yells over the noise. With a final shout, Michael completes the incantation, and the spirits vanish. The house falls silent. The next morning, the manor feels different. The oppressive atmosphere is gone, and sunlight streams through the windows. The family packs up their belongings, relieved that the ordeal is over. We should tell someone about this place, Sarah says, looking back at the manor. Michael nods. Let's make sure no one else has to go through this. They drive away, leaving the manor behind. Back home, life seems to return to normal. But one night, Emily finds the old mirror in her room, even though they left it at the manor. Her heart races as she sees words slowly appear on the surface. "We are not done," it reads. Emily turns to see a shadowy figure standing in the corner, its eyes glowing with malevolence. She screams as the room plunges into darkness.
The whispering woods loomed ominously under the fading light of dusk. Trees stood tall and twisted, their branches reaching out like clawed hands. A thick mist settled among the trees, obscuring the path ahead and adding to the sense of foreboding. Deep within the woods, an abandoned cabin stood desolate. Its windows were boarded up, and its door hung off its hinges. Weathered wood and creeping vines adorned the exterior. Inside, darkness and mustiness filled the air, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling like ghostly veils. The living room of the cabin was sparse, with a dilapidated sofa and a dusty rug covering the floor. A broken window let in a chilling breeze, causing the faded photographs on the walls to flutter ominously. The kitchen was in disarray, with broken cabinets and scattered utensils. The sink was stained, and a thick layer of grime covered the countertops. A single flickering bulb cast long, eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The backyard of the cabin was overgrown with weeds, and old rusted gardening tools lay abandoned among the tangled foliage. A gnarled tree stood in the center, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers against the moonlit sky, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The whispering woods at midnight were cloaked in darkness. The trees seemed to sway and whisper secrets to each other, their branches creaking in the stillness of the night. Strange, ghostly lights flickered among the shadows, adding to the sense of otherworldly dread. The bedroom was cold and drafty, with a creaky bed covered in moth-eaten sheets. Moonlight filtered through the cracks in the boarded-up window, casting eerie patterns on the floor and illuminating the room in a ghostly glow. The attic was filled with dusty, forgotten belongings. Old trunks sat in the corners, their contents long forgotten. Cobwebs hung from the rafters, and the air was heavy with the scent of decay, as if the very walls were whispering tales of the past. As dawn broke, the whispering woods were bathed in the soft light of morning. The mist began to dissipate, revealing the twisted trees and tangled underbrush. Birds chirped in the distance, bringing a sense of calm to the once eerie forest, as if the night's terrors had never existed.
A car winds its way through the thick fog, approaching the small town of Willow Creek. Inside are four friends, eager for a weekend of camping and adventure. As they reach the outskirts of town, they pass an old abandoned mansion shrouded in mist. A sense of unease settles over them, but they push it aside, eager to reach their destination.
The friends arrive at their campsite by Willow Creek, surrounded by towering trees and the gentle babble of the water. They set up their tents and gather around a crackling fire, swapping stories and roasting marshmallows. But as darkness falls, the woods seem to come alive with strange sounds, and a feeling of being watched settles over the group. As they explore the woods, the friends stumble upon an old, dilapidated cabin hidden among the trees. Intrigued, they cautiously approach, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. Inside, they find decaying furniture and strange symbols carved into the walls. Suddenly, they hear a noise from the darkness, a low, guttural growl that freezes them in their tracks. Driven by curiosity, the friends decide to investigate the abandoned mansion they passed earlier. As they approach, they're struck by its imposing presence, the windows boarded up, the walls covered in ivy. They push open the creaking door and step inside, the air heavy with the weight of forgotten memories. Inside the mansion, the friends are overcome by a sense of dread. Shadows dance in the corners of their vision, and cold spots chill them to the bone. They hear whispers in the darkness, urging them to leave, but they press on, determined to uncover the secrets hidden within the mansion's walls. As they delve deeper into the mansion, the friends encounter increasingly sinister phenomena. Objects move on their own, disembodied voices echo through the halls, and ghostly apparitions materialize before their eyes. Fear grips them, threatening to tear apart their sanity as they struggle to make sense of the horrors unfolding around them. With the mansion's malevolent presence closing in around them, the friends make a desperate bid for escape. They run through the twisting corridors, pursued by unseen forces that threaten to consume them whole. As they burst through the front door, gasping for breath, They realize they've escaped with their lives, but the horrors they've witnessed will haunt them forever.
Lisa moves into her new apartment. The building is old but charming. As she unpacks, she finds a small, locked box in the back of a closet. Curious, she sets it aside to figure out how to open it later. That night, Lisa hears strange noises, whispers, and faint footsteps. She brushes it off as her imagination, but the noises persist, growing louder each night. She starts to feel uneasy. Unable to ignore the noises any longer, Lisa decides to focus on the box. She finds an old key hidden in the apartment and uses it to unlock the box. Inside, she discovers old photographs and a diary. Lisa reads the diary, which belonged to a woman named Margaret, who lived in the apartment years ago. The diary describes how Margaret was tormented by an unseen presence. Her final entry is a plea for help. Lisa begins to see strange things in mirrors, shadows moving, and a woman's face appearing briefly. One night, she sees Margaret's face clearly in the bathroom mirror, mouthing the words, "Help me." Frightened, Lisa seeks help from a local historian. He tells her about Margaret, who mysteriously disappeared. He believes Margaret's spirit is trapped and trying to communicate with Lisa. Determined to help Margaret, Lisa sets up a small shrine with candles and the photographs. She reads a passage from the diary aloud, asking Margaret to show her how to help. The room grows cold, and Margaret's ghost appears. Margaret's ghost leads Lisa to a hidden compartment in the floor. Inside, Lisa finds Margaret's skeletal remains. She calls the police, and they properly lay Margaret to rest. The haunting finally stops. With Margaret's remains found and given a proper burial, the apartment feels lighter. Lisa no longer hears the strange noises. She stands by the window, feeling at peace, knowing she helped Margaret find rest. Months later, a new tenant moves into the apartment. They find the diary Lisa left behind, with a note warning about the box. The apartment is now just a home, free from its dark past.
Ravenwood Manor, a looming Gothic structure, dominates the landscape with its ominous presence. The setting sun bathes its darkened facade in a blood-red glow, as if warning all who dare approach of the secrets it holds within. The entrance to Ravenwood Manor is marked by ornate iron gates, their twisted designs speaking of a forgotten era. Vines snake their way around the cold metal, as if nature itself is reclaiming the estate from the hands of man. Within the sprawling grounds of Ravenwood Manor, darkness reigns supreme. Overgrown hedges and wilted flowers lend an air of neglect to the once grand estate. Moonlight struggles to penetrate the thick canopy of trees, casting eerie shadows upon the unkempt landscape. In the backyard of Ravenwood Manor, twisted paths wind their way through a maze of gnarled trees. At the center stands an ancient well, its stone walls covered in moss and mystery, beckoning those brave enough to uncover its secrets. Adjacent to Ravenwood Manor lies an overgrown cemetery, its weathered tombstones peeking through the tangled undergrowth like silent sentinels of the past. Wisps of fog cling to the ground, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the forgotten burial ground. Within the entrance hall of Ravenwood Manor, flickering candlelight casts long shadows upon the grand staircase. Tattered portraits line the walls, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow every move of those who dare to enter. In the dining room of Ravenwood Manor, a long table is set for an abandoned feast, its once luxurious settings now covered in dust and cobwebs. The chandelier above hangs low, its light obscured by the thick layer of neglect that pervades the room. Within the library of Ravenwood Manor, dusty shelves stretch as far as the eye can see, laden with forgotten tomes and ancient manuscripts. Moonlight filters through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns upon the worn carpet that bears the weight of centuries of knowledge. In the bedroom of Ravenwood Manor, the once grand canopy bed now sags under the weight of time, its tattered curtains billowing in the wind like ghosts of the past. Moonlight filters through cracked windows, casting eerie shadows upon the peeling wallpaper, as if the very walls themselves are haunted by the memories of those who once slept within. As dawn breaks, the front steps of Ravenwood Manor are bathed in the soft light of
The dense forest of Hollow Creek was known for its eerie legends. Sarah, a young journalist, drove through the fog-covered road, her headlights barely piercing the thick mist. She was here to investigate the mysterious disappearances that plagued the town. As she reached the edge of the forest, a grand, decaying mansion emerged from the fog. Sarah stepped inside the mansion, her footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The air was cold and damp, and the smell of mold filled her nose. She walked through the grand foyer, noticing the decaying furniture and torn paintings. Her flashlight flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Sarah's exploration led her to an old library. Shelves of dusty books lined the walls, and a grand fireplace dominated one side of the room. As she examined the books, she noticed one that seemed out of place. Pulling it out, a hidden door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow passageway. Sarah entered the hidden passage, her flashlight illuminating the narrow, claustrophobic space. The walls were lined with old, faded photographs and strange symbols. As she moved deeper, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The passage led to a small, hidden room, filled with old toys and a child's bed. In the hidden room, Sarah felt a sudden chill. She turned to see a ghostly figure of a young girl standing by the bed, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. The girl reached out to Sarah, whispering, "Help me." Before Sarah could react, the girl vanished, leaving a small antique locket on the bed. Sarah picked up the locket and opened it, revealing a photograph of the young girl and an inscription, "To my beloved daughter, Emily." Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah searched the mansion's records and discovered that Emily had disappeared decades ago. Her family had hidden a dark secret. Emily was not their only victim. As Sarah pieced together the tragic history, the spirits of the mansion grew restless. Shadows moved on their own, and ghostly whispers filled the air. Emily's spirit appeared again, this time leading Sarah to the basement. There she found the remains of Emily and other victims. The spirits demanded justice. Determined to set the spirits free, Sarah confronted the mansion's last living descendant, a reclusive old man. She forced him to confess to his family's crimes. As he admitted the truth, the spirits appeared, surrounding him. With a final, sorrowful wail, they dragged him into the shadows, vanishing forever. With the truth revealed and justice served, the mansion began to crumble. Sarah escaped just in time, watching from a distance as the once grand estate collapsed into ruins. The spirits of Hollow Creek were finally at peace, and the oppressive fog lifted, revealing a bright, clear sky.
Ravenswood Mansion loomed on the hill, surrounded by dense, dark woods. Its windows were dark, and the setting sun painted the sky with deep orange hues, casting eerie shadows across the land. Inside, the mansion's foyer was grand but covered in dust. A large, winding staircase led to the upper floors. An old chandelier hung from the ceiling, its crystals dull and dusty, hinting at the mansion's forgotten grandeur. The living room had a large fireplace with cold ashes, a dusty rug, and old furniture covered in white sheets. Faint light filtered through the broken windows, casting long shadows on the walls. The kitchen was in disrepair, with broken cabinets and rusted appliances. A large wooden table sat in the center, covered in cobwebs. The air was thick with the scent of decay and neglect. The dining room featured a long table with a dusty tablecloth and overturned chairs. The windows were boarded up, and the room was dimly lit by a single candle, casting flickering shadows on the walls. A grand staircase wound upward into darkness. The steps creaked underfoot, and the banister was thick with dust. A faint, eerie light glowed at the top of the stairs, beckoning yet foreboding. The master bedroom featured a large canopy bed covered in dust and cobwebs. The cracked windows allowed moonlight to filter through, illuminating the peeling wallpaper and adding to the room's eerie atmosphere. The basement was dark and damp, with stone walls and a dirt floor. Old rusty chains hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. The sense of dread was palpable. A hidden room in the basement was filled with old books and strange artifacts. A large, cracked mirror reflected a distorted image, and a single candle flickered on a dusty desk, casting unsettling shadows. As dawn broke, Ravenswood Mansion was bathed in soft, golden light. The shadows receded, but the mansion still looked eerie and abandoned. Birds began to sing, but the air was still heavy with the night's terrors.
Julia and her husband, Mark, move into an old Victorian house in a small town. The house is beautiful, but has been vacant for years. As they unpack, Julia finds an old dusty mirror in the attic. She decides to clean it and hang it in their bedroom. That night, Julia wakes up to strange sounds, whispering and soft footsteps. She dismisses it as the house settling. However, when she looks into the mirror, she briefly sees a shadowy figure behind her before it vanishes. Disturbed by the experience, Julia visits the local library to research the house's history. She learns that a woman named Elizabeth lived there a century ago and mysteriously disappeared. Locals believe her spirit haunts the house. Julia becomes convinced that the mirror is connected to Elizabeth. That night, she sees Elizabeth's ghost in the mirror again. This time, the ghost seems to be trying to communicate, mouthing the words, "Help me." Julia tells Mark about her experiences. Skeptical but wanting to support her, Mark suggests they consult a paranormal expert. The expert tells them that Elizabeth's spirit is trapped and needs help to find peace. The expert instructs them to perform a ritual to release Elizabeth's spirit. They set up candles and the mirror in the living room. Julia reads a passage provided by the expert. The room grows cold, and Elizabeth's spirit appears. Elizabeth's spirit reveals that she was murdered by her jealous husband and her body hidden in the basement. Julia and Mark are horrified but determined to give Elizabeth justice. They find her remains in the basement, just as she described. They call the police, who properly lay Elizabeth's remains to rest. Afterward, the house feels lighter and the strange occurrences stop. Julia looks at the mirror one last time and sees Elizabeth smiling peacefully before fading away. Months later, Julia and Mark have settled into their now peaceful home. They keep the mirror as a reminder of Elizabeth and the mystery they solved together. Life returns to normal, but they never forget the ghostly presence that once haunted their home. In a secluded forest lies a small clearing, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. 4 friends, Alex, Jess, Ryan, and Maya, set up camp for the night, their tents arranged in a circle around a crackling campfire. The woods around them are silent, save for the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. As night falls, a faint whisper drifts through the trees, barely audible over the crackling of the fire. The friends exchange uneasy glances, their senses on high alert. They dismiss it as the wind playing tricks on their ears and continue their conversation, but the whisper lingers in the back of their minds. As the night wears on, the friends notice that their supplies, flashlights, food, and water, begin to disappear one by one. They search frantically, their panic mounting with each missing item. Jess suggests that they may have misplaced them, but Alex's flashlight vanishes from his hand mid-sentence, leaving them in darkness. Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes appear in the darkness just beyond the edge of the clearing. The friends freeze, their breath catching in their throats as they watch the eyes move closer, their glow growing brighter with each step. They realize too late that they are not alone in the woods. With adrenaline fueling their movements, the friends leap to their feet and flee into the woods, their hearts pounding with fear. Branches claw at their clothes and roots trip them up as they run blindly through the darkness. Behind them, the unseen presence gives chase, its footsteps echoing through the night. Exhausted and terrified, the friends stumble into a small clearing, their backs pressed against a towering rock formation. With nowhere left to run, they turn to face their pursuer, their hearts pounding in their chests. The glowing eyes emerge from the darkness, revealing a creature of nightmare, a spectral being with twisted features and malevolent intent. Evelyn, Mark, Lisa, and John arrived at Crescent Grove, a forgotten village nestled deep in the forest. The sun was setting, casting eerie shadows on the abandoned buildings. The village was said to be haunted, and the 4 friends had come to investigate the rumors. "This place gives me the creeps," Lisa whispered, clutching Mark's arm. "Don't worry, it's just for one night," Mark reassured her. Evelyn led the group, her curiosity piqued by the mystery. "Let's find a place to set up camp." John the skeptic laughed. "Ghosts aren't real, you'll see." They found an old inn at the center of the village and decided to make it their base for the night. The building was dusty and filled with cobwebs. As they set up their sleeping bags in the main hall, strange noises echoed through the empty corridors. "Did you hear that?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "It's just the wind," John replied, though he didn't sound convinced. Evelyn found an old diary on a shelf. "This might tell us what happened here," she said, opening it. As Evelyn read from the diary, the friends learned about the village's dark past. The villagers had practiced forbidden rituals, summoning a malevolent spirit that eventually destroyed them. This is creepy, Mark said, glancing around nervously. We should leave, Lisa urged, fear in her eyes. We need to stay and finish this, Evelyn insisted. We have to find out if the spirit is still here. Suddenly the air grew cold and the lights flickered. A shadowy figure appeared at the end of the hall, its eyes glowing with a sinister red light. The friends froze in terror. Run! Mark shouted, but the figure moved faster, blocking their exit. Evelyn held up the diary like a shield. We need to use the ritual described here to banish it. The spirit lashed out, knocking John to the ground. Lisa screamed and Mark pulled her back, trying to protect her. With trembling hands, Evelyn and Mark gathered the materials needed for the ritual described in the diary. Lisa and John tried to hold the spirit at bay, their fear palpable. Hurry up, Lisa cried as the spirit advanced. We're almost ready, Evelyn said, her voice shaking. Mark, light the candles. Mark lit the candles, forming a protective circle. Evelyn began to chant the incantation from the diary, her voice growing stronger with each word. The spirit roared in fury, trying to break through the protective circle. Evelyn continued to chant, her voice now steady and commanding. The air crackled with energy as the spirit's form began to waver. Keep going, Mark urged, holding Lisa close. John, recovering from the spirit's attack, joined in the chant. The spirit let out a deafening scream as it was forced back. With one final word, Evelyn completed the ritual. The spirit dissolved into the air, leaving a deafening silence behind. The friends collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a peaceful silence. We did it, Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's get out of here, Lisa urged, her eyes still wide with fear. They gathered their things and left the inn, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. As they walked away from Crescent Grove, they felt a sense of triumph and relief. Let's never do this again, John said, managing a weak smile. As they walked away from the village, the sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the forest. The village behind them was now just a distant memory, a place they would never forget but never return to. Let's make a pact, Evelyn said, stopping to look at her friends. We never speak of this again. Agreed, Mark, Lisa, and John said in unison. They walked on, the past behind them and the future ahead, grateful to have survived the haunting of Crescent Grove. In the heart of a dense forest lies an abandoned mansion, its decrepit walls shrouded in darkness. 4 friends, Alex, Maya, Ben, and Lily, venture into the woods one misty evening, drawn by rumors of the mansion's haunting. As they approach, the mist thickens, enveloping the mansion in an eerie veil. With trepidation, the friends push open the creaking front door and step into the mansion's entryway. Cobwebs hang from the ceiling, and dust motes dance in the dim light. The air is heavy with a sense of foreboding as they explore further, their footsteps echoing off the dilapidated walls. Inside the mansion, they encounter a labyrinth of hallways lined with closed doors. Each room they enter is filled with decaying remnants of the past. Strange symbols are etched into the walls, and a chill wind whispers through the corridors, sending shivers down their spines. As they delve deeper into the mansion, they begin to hear faint whispers that seem to echo through the halls. The whispers grow louder and more insistent, filling the air with an unsettling chorus. The friends exchange nervous glances, their hearts pounding as they try to locate the source of the haunting sounds. Suddenly, ghostly figures materialize before them, translucent apparitions with hollow eyes and outstretched hands. The ethereal beings glide through the air, their movements graceful yet unsettling. The friends watch in horror as the spirits draw closer, their presence filling the mansion with a chilling aura. With adrenaline driving them, the friends turn and flee from the mansion, their hearts pounding with terror. They race through the dark corridors, their breath ragged and their footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind them, the ghostly spirits follow, their unearthly wails growing fainter as the friends struggle to escape. Exhausted and trembling, the friends emerge from the mansion, their minds reeling from the horrors they've witnessed. They collapse on the ground outside, their bodies shaking with adrenaline and fear. As the mist begins to dissipate, they share a silent vow never to return to the shadowed mansion in the woods. Emma, a young writer in her late 20s, inherits an old mansion called Everwood Manor from her estranged aunt. Hoping to find inspiration for her next novel, she moves into the house. As she steps inside, she feels an unsettling chill. The house, surrounded by tall, dark trees, looks like it hasn't been lived in for years. Dust covers the furniture, and the air is thick with the scent of old wood and mildew. She feels a strange sense of foreboding, but brushes it off as nerves. On her first night, Emma struggles to sleep. The house is filled with strange noises, the creaking of floorboards, the whisper of the wind through cracks in the windows, and distant, indistinct whispers. She hears what sounds like footsteps outside her bedroom door, but when she checks, no one is there. She returns to bed, uneasy and sleep-deprived. The next day, while exploring the house, Emma discovers a locked door in the basement. Curious, she searches the house and finds an old rusty key hidden in a drawer. She uses the key to unlock the door and finds a small room filled with old furniture, cobwebs, and a large ornate mirror covered with a cloth. Emma removes the cloth from the mirror and, to her shock, sees the reflection of a young girl standing behind her. When she turns around, no one is there. The mirror begins to show disturbing images of past events in the house, including a girl being trapped and crying for help. Emma feels a chill run down her spine. Determined to find out more, Emma searches the house and finds an old diary hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace. The diary belonged to her aunt and details a tragic story of a girl named Lily who lived in the house and mysteriously disappeared. Emma realizes the ghost she saw is Lily, trapped in the mirror. Emma decides to perform a seance to communicate with Lily's spirit. She sets up candles and chants words from the diary. The room grows cold, and Lily's ghost appears, revealing that she was trapped by a dark ritual performed by Emma's aunt. Lily begs Emma to free her. Following Lily's instructions, Emma gathers the items needed to break the ritual: a locket, a piece of Lily's clothing, and a special incantation. As she performs the ritual, the house shakes violently, and a dark, malevolent spirit tries to stop her. Emma persists, chanting the incantation louder and louder. The dark spirit attacks, but Emma continues the ritual, calling out to Lily for strength. A bright light fills the room, and the dark spirit screams before dissipating into nothingness. Lily's spirit smiles gratefully at Emma before ascending into the light, finally freed. With the haunting over, the house feels lighter and more welcoming. Emma finishes her novel, inspired by Lily's story. She decides to keep Everwood Manor and transform it into a place of peace and creativity. Sitting on the porch, she feels a deep connection to the house and its history, ready for a new beginning. Briarwood Manor stood silent and foreboding at the end of a long, winding road. Jane, a young historian, arrived just as the sun was setting. She had heard stories about the mansion's dark past and was determined to uncover the truth. As she approached the front door, the wind howled and the trees whispered ominously. Jane pushed open the heavy wooden door, which creaked loudly. The interior was dark and filled with the smell of dust and decay. She turned on her flashlight, revealing a grand but dilapidated foyer. The once beautiful chandeliers hung broken, and the walls were lined with tattered wallpaper. In the main hallway, Jane's flashlight beam fell on a large portrait of a stern-looking man. The eyes seemed to follow her as she moved. She felt a shiver run down her spine. Suddenly, a cold breeze blew through the hallway, and the portrait's expression changed to one of anger. Jane discovered a hidden door behind a bookshelf in the library. She pushed it open to find a small, secret room. The room was filled with old, dusty books and strange artifacts. In the center of the room was a table with a large, leather-bound journal. She opened it and began to read. The journal belonged to William Briarwood, the original owner of the manor. It detailed dark rituals and a pact with a malevolent spirit to gain wealth and power. The final entry mentioned a curse that would doom anyone who lived in the house. Jane realized the manor was haunted by the spirits of those sacrificed in the rituals. As Jane read the journal, she heard whispers around her. Ghostly figures of the sacrificed appeared, their faces twisted in agony. They warned her to leave before it was too late. The temperature in the room dropped, and Jane could see her breath. She knew she had to get out. Rushing to leave, Jane encountered the malevolent spirit of William Briarwood himself. He appeared at the top of the grand staircase, his eyes glowing with an evil light. He blocked her path, his voice echoing through the manor, threatening her for disturbing his peace. Jane ran through the dark hallways, the spirit close behind her. She burst through the front door and into the night. The manor seemed to sigh as she left, the wind howling around her. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. As she drove away, she could still feel the spirit's eyes on her. Safe in her apartment, Jane reviewed the footage she had captured. The images of the spirits and the journal entries were clear evidence of the haunting. She knew she had to share the story, but a part of her feared the curse might follow her. She felt a cold draft and shivered, wondering if she was truly safe. 4 friends, Jake, Emily, Noah, and Lily, stood outside an old, abandoned house on a dare. The house was infamous in their town for being haunted, but they decided to spend the night there to prove their bravery. They pushed open the rusty gate and walked to the front door, which creaked loudly as they opened it. Inside, the house was dark and musty, with broken furniture and cobwebs everywhere. In the living room, they saw an old, dusty couch and a broken chandelier. Suddenly, a cold breeze blew through the room, making them shiver. They heard a faint whisper, but couldn't tell where it came from. They decided to explore upstairs. The wooden stairs creaked with every step. At the top, they found a long hallway with several closed doors. They heard a strange scratching sound coming from one of the rooms. They opened the door to the room and saw a rocking chair moving on its own. The temperature dropped suddenly, and they saw the faint outline of a ghostly figure in the corner. The figure whispered, "Leave this place." Panicking, they ran downstairs and found a door leading to the basement. Despite their fear, they decided to investigate. The basement was even colder and darker. They found strange symbols on the walls and old, dusty furniture. In the basement, they heard footsteps behind them. Turning around, they saw the ghostly figure again, now clearer and more menacing. The ghost raised its hand, and the friends felt an icy wind pushing them towards the stairs. Screaming, they ran up the stairs and out of the house, the door slamming shut behind them. They didn't stop running until they were far from the house. They vowed never to return, and to never speak of what they had seen.
Ravenwood Manor, a looming Gothic structure, dominates the landscape with its ominous presence. The setting sun bathes its darkened facade in a blood-red glow, as if warning all who dare approach of the secrets it holds within. The entrance to Ravenwood Manor is marked by ornate iron gates, their twisted designs speaking of a forgotten era. Vines snake their way around the cold metal, as if nature itself is reclaiming the estate from the hands of man. Within the sprawling grounds of Ravenwood Manor, darkness reigns supreme. Overgrown hedges and wilted flowers lend an air of neglect to the once grand estate. Moonlight struggles to penetrate the thick canopy of trees, casting eerie shadows upon the unkempt landscape. In the backyard of Ravenwood Manor, twisted paths wind their way through a maze of gnarled trees. At the center stands an ancient well, its stone walls covered in moss and mystery, beckoning those brave enough to uncover its secrets. Adjacent to Ravenwood Manor lies an overgrown cemetery, its weathered tombstones peeking through the tangled undergrowth like silent sentinels of the past. Wisps of fog cling to the ground, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the forgotten burial ground. Within the entrance hall of Ravenwood Manor, flickering candlelight casts long shadows upon the grand staircase. Tattered portraits line the walls, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow every move of those who dare to enter. In the dining room of Ravenwood Manor, a long table is set for an abandoned feast, its once luxurious settings now covered in dust and cobwebs. The chandelier above hangs low, its light obscured by the thick layer of neglect that pervades the room. Within the library of Ravenwood Manor, dusty shelves stretch as far as the eye can see, laden with forgotten tomes and ancient manuscripts. Moonlight filters through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns upon the worn carpet that bears the weight of centuries of knowledge. In the bedroom of Ravenwood Manor, the once grand canopy bed now sags under the weight of time, its tattered curtains billowing in the wind like ghosts of the past. Moonlight filters through cracked windows, casting eerie shadows upon the peeling wallpaper, as if the very walls themselves are haunted by the memories of those who once slept within. As dawn breaks, the front steps of Ravenwood Manor are bathed in the soft light of Elmwood Manor stood alone, surrounded by tall dead trees. Its windows were dark, and the setting sun cast long, eerie shadows across the overgrown lawn. The sky was a deep orange, adding to the sinister atmosphere. Inside the manor, the foyer was grand but neglected. Dust and cobwebs covered everything, including the old chandelier that hung from the ceiling. A grand staircase led to the upper floors, and debris littered the floor. The living room had a cold fireplace, a dusty rug, and furniture covered in white sheets. Broken windows let in faint light, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. The dining room featured a long table covered in a dusty cloth. Chairs were overturned, and cobwebs hung from the chandelier above. The windows were boarded up, making the room feel even more claustrophobic. The kitchen was cluttered with old rusty pots and broken cabinets. An old wooden table sat in the center, covered in dust and cobwebs, adding to the room's decrepit state. The library was filled with old dusty books and cobwebs. A large, ornate mirror hung on one wall, and a single candle flickered on a desk, casting unsettling shadows that seemed to move on their own. The bedroom featured a large canopy bed covered in dust. The cracked windows let in moonlight, illuminating the peeling wallpaper. An old wardrobe stood open and empty, adding to the room's eerie stillness. The basement was dark and damp, with stone walls and a dirt floor. Old rusty chains hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. The atmosphere was oppressive and filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. A hidden room in the basement was filled with strange artifacts and old books. A large cracked mirror reflected a distorted image, and a single candle flickered on a desk, casting eerie shadows that seemed to shift and move. As dawn broke, Elmwood Manor was bathed in soft, golden light. The shadows receded, but the mansion still looked eerie and abandoned. Birds began to sing, but the air remained heavy with the terror of the night. The haunting was over, but the memories lingered, a testament to the mansion's dark past.